Well, it's 75 degrees and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the hottest part of the day. Very, very pleasant day today, and I feel sorry for those of you that are still sweltering, but I am enjoying this cool weather. We're going to be looking at 1 Kings, and we're going to also be looking at Chronicles in order to see the parallel passages and to fill in the missing pieces and to see those things that complement each other. 1 Kings chapter 3 through 5 and 2 Chronicles chapters 1 through 3 is what we'll be covering today. And we talked about yesterday Solomon getting off to a really good start with the favor of man and God, and dealing with his adversaries. Today we want to take a look at, first of all, the example that everybody uses for Solomon's wisdom. And it's an interesting story found in 1 Kings chapter 3, beginning at verse 16. There's two prostitutes, and they each live in the same house, and they have babies within 3 days of each other. One rolls over in her sleep and kills her baby, slips out of her bed and takes the dead baby and puts it in the arms of the other woman, and takes the live baby back to her bed. In the morning, the woman who should have had a live baby wakes up to a dead baby in her arms as she tries to nurse it. And in the light of day, she sees that it's really not her baby. So she takes her complaint to the king, King Solomon, who has prayed for wisdom for his people. After he hears the story that both of them are claiming that the live baby is theirs and the dead baby is the other one's child, he decides to show his wisdom. And he asks his servants to bring a sword so that the live baby could be cut in two and each of the ladies could have half of the live baby. Well, it's a little ridiculous, but nevertheless it gets across the point. The mother of the true child, the live baby, gasps and says, "Oh no, let the child live." After all, she knows it is hers and she loves it. Well, I hope you watched yesterday's video, because I had a comment from one of my subscribers. They said that after watching my video, they were going to make it their rest of their life task to change Republicans into Democrats so that the world would be a better place for the children to come. Now, whether they said it in jest, whether they said it to try to get my goat, or whether they said it sincerely, I got to tell you, the answer to the world's problems is not the Republicans and it's not the Democrats. It's the lostness of mankind. If mankind would just follow God's guidelines, we wouldn't have any problems, and that was the whole point of yesterday's cause and effect. The effects that we see today can't be fixed by Republicans or Democrats. It can only be fixed by God. And so I hope that you got that message loud and clear. The real answer to today's problems is God and his standards, and not in any political party. I hope that clarifies that for my subscriber. We're taking a look at the consecutive order of the scriptures by looking at a chronological Bible, and we've been working through from 2 Samuel and then into 1 Kings, and we have looked at the Psalms that are ascribed to David. And so I thought it'd be interesting to try to go back and summarize real quickly, rather than taking the time to go back through in each psalm and that's ascribed to David and talk about what it has in it. But some people have subscribed to the fact that there's 60 that are David's psalms, and That's still nearly a half of the 150 Psalms that we have. There's certainly 14 that occurred after David was subscribed to having 60 Psalms. Those were during David's time and certainly were used by David, so most people say it was about 74 or 73 Psalms that are attributed to David in David's time, 50 to Ezra, 10 to Korah, 2 Solomon, 1 Moses, 1 for each of 2 other writers, and we have looked at about 74 of the Psalms as I've been studying, and we've mentioned that there are a couple of things that you ought to know about Psalms, and the fact that there is in some Bibles it's listed as an interlude, and some it's listed as Selah 71 times, which is a pause or a brief time to meditate on what do you think about what has already been said to this point. We've talked about the superscripts, that is, some of the words that above the actual psalm that help us to understand the instructions for the song leader that was to lead these songs, the occasions for these songs, or the instruments that were to be used during the playing of these psalms, or the voices, or the tune, or the melody, or the timing of the psalms as they were sung in a worship experience. But I broke them down into petitions, praise, information or instruction, faith, or the other words for faith would be trust and confidence, confession, and God's actual speaking. I think I will probably take the time, when I have the time, to go through and actually make an index of the Psalms. What kind of petition was it? What kind of praise was it? What kind of information or instruction do we find in it? What is the statement of faith or trust or confidence that was expressed? What kind of confession was made for what kind of sin? And when did actually the psalm indicate that God spoke? Now we know that God spoke through His Word, and so all of the Psalms are inspired by God and therefore are God speaking, but there are some places where it actually says, and God spoke. In any case, I think it'd be real interesting to do an index on all of the Psalms and to make that a point of study, and I always benefit more from my studies and my working out things like an index for Psalms than I would any other way learning and growing. And we're all supposed to be disciples that are learning and growing. The next thing that I want to share with you is that there is a wonderful index available just by Googling Proverbs indexes or subject matter of Proverbs that would help you to know where to go in Proverbs for particularly information or instruction. Proverbs is just filled with wonderful wisdom, wonderful sayings, and it's worthy of a great deal of study. I want to also clarify something that someone said recently, that the Old Testament is predominantly to point out how helpless and how much we needed a Savior when Jesus came, and that is true, but I think it would be a terrible mistake to underplay the fact that there's tremendous amount of instruction, tremendous amount of examples that we can learn from of the do's and don'ts of life. Watching and studying the life of David or Abraham or Moses and learning from them is an incredible value of the Old Testament. So it's not just pointing out the hopelessness of not having a Savior, which it certainly is, pointing that out and how amazing the grace of God is through Jesus Christ, but it's a tremendous instructional book, and I think that we would be very, very short of the mark if we just treated it only as something that pointed to the need for a Savior. There's an awful lot of information that's instructional. And anyway, I thought I'd close out this week and this particular section of study on the Psalms that are attributed to David by reading to you from Psalm 124. Had it not been for the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now say, had it not been for the Lord who was on our side, when men rose up against us, then they would have swallowed us alive. When their anger was kindled against us, then the waters would have engulfed us, the streams would have swept over our souls, and the raging waters would have swept over our soul. Blessed be the Lord, who has not given us to be torn by their teeth. Our souls have escaped as a bird out of the snare of a trapper. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made the heavens and the earth. What a beautiful psalm. Had it not been for the Lord, what would my life have been like? Had it not been for the fact that I recognized that Jesus died for my sins, what would my life have been like? Yes, the way to change the world is one person at a time, who wants to live by God's standards, who's not selfish, who's not proud, and who will treat others as they want to be treated. One person at a time. Tell them about Jesus. Tell them about the Bible. Tell them about what God's perfect plan for this world is. Now, we know we're not going to change what God has already foretold, but we may delay a little. We may make it a little better place until he comes again, but we're not going to change it through a Republican or through a Democrat or through any kind of social movement. It's going to have to be God moving within man that will change this world. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you. Have a great day.